time here in this program. I joined first in 2018 as a student. I was at your side, and then last year and now as a lecturer, so it's always a pleasure to be here. I have prepared a slight long presentation, so let's see if we can make it fit into the time. In order to set the context for this presentation, I would like to ask you a question, whether you know who these two gentlemen here are. And anybody tell me?
Tesla.
Yes. The other one? No clue? Okay, so on the left side we have Thomas Edison. And on the right side, Nikola Tesla. So Thomas Edison is a famous inventor of the light bulb. Nikola Tesla is, among many other things he invented, he was the one who conceived the method of transmitting electricity through alternating current instead of direct current, which proved to be a more efficient mode. So Thomas Edison is recognized as a famous inventor, but he was, above all, a very successful businessman. So his name is attached to these marvelous things that he has invented: the light bulb, the motion picture camera, the kinetograph. But so his name is linked to these inventions not because only he was an inventor, but mainly because he was a successful businessman. So actually, it is said that 22 people before Thomas Edison actually had conceived an equipment, something similar to a light bulb. But his light bulb proved to be have a better quality material, a higher vacuum inside the glass, and also better incandescent material. So it was the one who actually made it to the market and had more success. Similarly, the motion picture camera, it was not invented by him, but one of his employees. But he was the one who actually had his name attached to the invention. Nikola Tesla, also a great inventor, but contrary to Thomas Edison, he was a terrible businessman. Actually, he was born in today's Croatian territory in 1856, and then migrated to the US in the 1880s after working for Thomas Edison in his office in Paris. He eventually broke up with Edison and went to work with George Westinghouse, and that's where he conceived his method of transmitting electricity through alternating current, and there he made lots of money. But with that money, he actually he employed that money to make what he liked more, which was experimenting, tinkering, and playing around. So he played around with, he conceived, for example, the radio remote control, the wireless bulb, and also his major, let's say, project, or his major objective, which was transmitting electricity through the air. But none of his, let's say, inventions actually made it to the market, and he died in 1943, something like that, as a poor man. So why did I bring this example here to you? Well, you have definitely come across this acronym many times. But I would like to, and normally we tend to take this acronym as one single concept, STI, right? But what I want to do here is to draw a conceptual line between science, technology, and innovation. So really identify the main difference here. So Nikola Tesla was the science technology guy. He was the guy actually who was concerned with advancing the boundaries of scientific, technological knowledge. He was concerned in conceiving new methods and seeing how things work. On the contrary, Thomas Edison was the innovation guy. He actually was more concerned into taking this knowledge and making this knowledge have an actual impact in society, have an actual impact in economy. So that's the difference that I would like to stress here. Science technology, about new knowledge, about new, let's say, new methods, and innovation about causing impact, causing actually, have some benefits for the economy, for the society. I will very quickly go through the concept of innovation, and here innovation is mainly an economic term. It was first extensively conceptualized by the Austrian thinker Joseph Schumpeter in the beginning of the 20th century, and he conceived, or he saw innovation as the emergence of a new element. It could be a technology, it could be a new method, a new production process, or even a new material that was able to, let's say, revolutionize the paradigms that was prevalent in a certain economy at a certain point of time. So for him, innovation was capable of creative destruction, meaning destroy the established structure, destroy the established equilibrium of the market, and make the economy reorganize itself in another level under certain and new paradigms. So the first industrial revolution, the second industrial revolution were the examples of these, let's say, creative destructions that were closer to Joseph Schumpeter. So he saw this as the metaphor he used was that of a long wave, which started with a big uproar, then with the effects being absorbed, and then eventually getting diluted. There are other concepts that Schumpeter brought about was the difference between growth and development. So market growth is merely a quantitative process, a quantitative phenomenon in which you expand the market by, for example, if you have an increase in population or increase the territory of a country. Whereas development or economic development is more of a qualitative phenomenon. It's, of course, it has its quantitative component, but it's also qualitative because you change the method, you change, let's say, the paradigm in which you produce and bring the economy to a whole, to a new level. And I think essential in the, let's say, the theory of Schumpeter was the entrepreneur. He was, let's say, a spontaneity factor that was capable of bringing innovation to the economy, bringing the economy to this new level. So that was, let's say, how innovation came into economic theory. In the middle of the 20th century, actually during the Second World War, we saw the, let's say, emergence of lots of intellectual work to think about how innovation can be put into practice. So how innovation can be translated into concrete scientific policy models. So the first major science policy model was the one conceived by Vannevar Bush, who was by that time the head of the US Scientific Research and Development Office under the White House. And he had an article called Science, the Endless Frontier, in which he conceived the linear model of innovation. Basically what he said was that innovation followed clear one-way path that starts with basic research, moves on to applied research, and then goes on to development, production, and market. This idea of linear model of innovation influenced many of the policies that were conceived mainly by developed countries in the 60s, 70s. What happened in the 80s is that this linear model was gradually questioned and also gradually it was also to some extent gradually abandoned, and it was replaced by a more systematic and organic view of, let's say, innovation. That's when, for example, the concept of innovation ecosystem, scientific ecosystem came about. And it basically meaning that innovation can come from different sources, not only from basic research, but from different types of actors, and through various interactions between these different types of actors. Maybe the most famous model that, let's say, is of this, let's say, systematic organic approach is the triple helix model that was conceived by Henry Yatzkowitz and Leidesdorf in the 2000s. And this was the book in which they have laid out the, let's say, main principles of this approach, the triple helix approach. So basically, according to the authors, innovation comes from the multiple types of interactions between industry, university, and government. Other models that came after this is the quadruple helix. They include the society as a, let's say, a force here, and also people are already talking about the quintuple helix. So, but all, let's say, all of these models have they let's say, use as a basis the triple helix model from 2008. Now coming to innovation diplomacy. So basically, when innovation becomes gradually, let's say, the major driving force for economic development, it's quite natural that countries, that governments use their diplomatic tools or their diplomacy to achieve these goals, to, let's say, increase their technological capability, to increase their innovation capability. So innovation diplomacy is basically that. It's diplomacy used towards the goal of increasing national technological innovation capabilities. Here, I like, it's important to stress the, let's say, the difference between science diplomacy and innovation diplomacy. So science diplomacy, as the way I see it, is, let's say, more focused on cooperation, on scientific cooperation. Of course, always with the national interest in mind, but I think the primary goal here is to engage with other countries in order to cooperate and to generate and advance the boundaries of knowledge and so on. Whereas innovation diplomacy, cooperation is also fundamental, is also an essential part, but I think innovation diplomacy is more focused on national interest. It's more focused on the development of national capabilities, of national technological capabilities in developing the national technology industry and so on. So there are some authors who say that innovation diplomacy is, let's say, an evolution of science diplomacy, but actually I see these are two different areas that, let's say, complement each other and sometimes use similar tools, but also they have, let's say, different focus. And I would like to share with you, if you can distribute to your colleagues here, is very, let's say, one basis document for innovation diplomacy that was conceived within the context of the São Paulo Innovation and Science Diplomacy School that took place in São Paulo, in Brazil, in August 2019. One of the results of Inside SP, this school, was the São Paulo Framework of Innovation Diplomacy, in which the lecturers, the students, and also the panelists of this 2 weeks course came together to suggest a possible definition of innovation diplomacy and also to list all the, let's say, practices that comes under the concept of innovation diplomacy. You can read the definition and this for yourself. I will just highlight some of the practices that, according to the São Paulo Framework of Innovation Diplomacy, falls under the remit of innovation diplomacy. basically is high-tech trade and R&D investment, so fostering high-tech trade and attracting R&D investment. International technology transfer as a, let's say, a process with its various means. It's facilitating market access for technology companies. It's the mobilization of science technology diasporas, very important use case here in India. And also supporting, for example, the conceptualization of international innovation reports and rankings, and also supporting and participating in the international intellectual property region. Let me bring you just some examples of some of these practices that fall into innovation diplomacy. So when it comes to attracting R&D investment, I think one good example is Ireland. Ireland is a country that has specialized in attracting R&D, not so much for manufacturing, but let's say FDI, for attracting foreign direct investment, not so much for manufacturing, but specialized in R&Ds. Many companies, many international companies have their development centers in Ireland, for example, Dell, Facebook, Google, and so on. And so attracting foreign direct investments is one of the 3 pillars of Ireland when it comes to their innovation strategy. The other 2 pillars is entrepreneurship, so fostering entrepreneurship among the Irish nationals, and also supporting R&D made in universities. So in order to attract foreign direct investment for R&D, of course, Ireland needs to do a lot of work. It has, for example, to provide, of course, tax incentives so that the companies can be attracted. It has also to provide an exports-oriented environment. But I think the main thing is to provide a highly qualified population so that the companies will find a workforce that, let's say, suitable for R&D work in the country. So that has lots of benefits for Ireland. I think one is, of course, providing high-quality jobs, which is, let's say, better paid jobs, and which increase the quality of life of the population, but also the spillover effect. So mainly when these, let's say, highly technological companies come to Ireland, they have to engage with local companies as their local providers. So, and some of these technologies that these foreign companies develop, they eventually get partially or in a greater extent also incorporated by these, let's say, suppliers, local suppliers. Another concept, or let's say another practice that falls under innovation diplomacy in international technology transfer. Of course, this is a, let's say, a very broad subject. I will really not go into detail here. But when it comes to international technology transfer, I think it's important that there are various levels of technology transfer. Some countries say that when they sell one, let's say, high technology product, AI software, or let's say a machine to another country, they are transferring technology to that country. Of course, this certainly has an impact on the economy of the receiving country, but the mere trade of high-tech product solution can be seen as technology transfer, but they are what I think are deeper levels of technology transfer. Is, for example, when one multinational decides to invest in a foreign country for building up manufacturing plants, for example. They are not selling products, they are now building those products in a foreign country and transferring production process, they are transferring more know-how to that country. So it's a deeper, let's say, level of technology transfer. And of course, what I would say is the deepest level of technology transfer is the transfer of technological capability, when R&D is actually transferred to another countries. And here, of course, there are various sub-levels when one company decides to establish an R&D center in a foreign country just to adapt its core technology to the local market, or when actually global in-depth R&D is transferred to a foreign country. So there are various levels here. One interesting example of international technology transfer and foreign direct investment is the Norwegian oil and gas industry. That's a very interesting case because so Norway is today recognized as a major oil and gas power. We have Equinor, which is the main state company, which has assets in more than 35 countries. But Norway started to become knowledgeable or acquire the capability of oil and gas industry only in the 1970s. So up till then, so there was no knowledge at all in the country, and it was when the oil was discovered in the Norwegian continental shelf. So initially, Norway had to rely on foreign direct investment. So basically, British companies, they would allow them to explore oil in their coast or coastal area, but those, let's say, exploration contracts were conditional on with R&D contracts with local entities. And also, in, let's say, parallel to that, the Norwegian government has also financed lots of basic research and applied research in the oil and gas sector. So as of today, Norway, apart from exploring oil and gas, it's also a major exporter, for example, of floating platforms, and also a major technology expert in drillings and so on. And it has also generated lots of spin-offs, so mainly the naval industry and also the electric car industry somehow benefited from the technologies that were developed by Norway throughout its history in the oil and gas sector. Another interesting project involving international technology transfer, but in another, let's say, approach, it's linked to an offset agreement, is the one that has been signed beginning, I think, 2013, between Saab, the Swedish airplane manufacturer, and the Brazilian Air Force. So it involves the acquisition by the Brazilian Air Force of 36 Gripen fighter jets, but it's not simply, let's say, procurement of these 36 fighter jets. Actually, in the contract, through this contract, Saab has to transfer technology, transfer the capability of developing certain core elements of the fighter jets to 5 Brazilian companies, Embraer being the, let's say, leading one. So it's a long project started in 2015. Contract was signed in 2013, but it started in 2015 and goes up to 2024. In total, 60 international technology transfer projects, more than 300 Brazilian engineers involved, and of course many other Swedish one. And so it's the project, how it has been defined, it starts the production of the fighter jets in Sweden, and then more than half will be then finally produced in Brazil. And the picture above is the one of the first, let's say, test flight of the first fighter jet that was produced under this contract. That picture is from August last year. Another practice is, of course, internationalization of technological companies, and here I think some countries have specialized in bringing especially startups to foreign markets, and this can be done through visits, organization of visits of startups to foreign markets, innovation mission, which is a more, let's say, organized process, which starts with some preparatory capacity building sessions, and then with a follow-up. And then finally, maybe what is the, let's say, most developed concept of this internationalization of startups is the cross-incubation of startups, in which two countries engage together to exchange their startups, and these startups spend maybe 1 month in another country in order to adapt its products to that foreign market. And here I'd like to bring the example of the Indian-Brazilian project that it's the Agritech Cross Incubation Program. That was, it's a partnership between the Brazilian Embassy, the Brazilian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the Department of Science and Technology of India. That project consists of 2 phases, so 2 weeks each. So the first phase was just 3 weeks ago, in which 5 Brazilian agritech startups came to India, spent 1 week in Delhi, 1 week in Hyderabad, and in these 2 weeks engaged with local investors, with local corporates, and really tried to explore the market. Second phase of this project will consist of 5 Indian agritech startups going to Brazil in April, May, and again trying to explore the Brazilian market there. And so it involves really very comprehensive programs of field visits, pitch sessions, and with actual farmers, and also with large agri-corporates. One other, maybe the final aspect I would like to highlight here is the mobilization of science technology diasporas. That's a very important topic, and normally we tend to see the migration of scientists, of engineers to another country is a very, especially from a developing country point of view, is a very negative process, right? So we have been always termed this as a brain drain. So we are training our engineers, we are training our scientists, and then they move on, go to the US or to Europe and make money there, and there's no benefit for the origin country. But I think there's we can see this from different angles, and I think the Indian case is a very interesting case, where you all know the Indian IT industry is a very famous one. It generates more than $100 billion of exports to India a year, and it has grown to that extent precisely because of the work of the Indian diaspora in the United States and the UK and other parts of Europe. So it was the Indian diaspora which actually established the links between local companies in the US and their companies, IT companies, back here in India. So I think it's up to governments to mobilize their science technology diasporas and see how they can benefit their origin country. And Brazil has been doing that, especially in the US and the UK. We've been trying to, at least initially, to get to know who are the Brazilian scientists who are in these markets, because it's not so easy. They are spread around, and sometimes they have no, they have maybe family ties, but no, let's say, professional ties anymore with Brazil. But so we are trying in an effort to at least to get to know where they are active, in which sectors, and how their research, how their work in companies can benefit Brazil, can benefit the Brazilian industry, the Brazilian economy. Just for your reference, also, I think that's what is also part, it's very important that when we think about innovation, that we are able to benchmark, that we can compare ourselves in terms of how countries are doing with the innovation. So there is this Global Innovation Index, which was created by an Indian, by Sumitra Dutta from IIT Delhi, back in 2005. And so now it's an yearly report that comes out normally in the middle of the year, and then try to rank the countries according to their innovation capabilities, both from a, let's say, innovation input point of view, innovation output point of view. So how much papers, let's say, scientists from a certain country produce, how is the level of their educational system, and how many, let's say, health technology, how many exports of high technology machines or equipment they do. So all these, it's more than 100 variables that come into account here, and they publish on a yearly basis this ranking. Yeah, that was, I'm sorry if I've taken too much time, but in a nutshell, that's what I wanted to say about innovation diplomacy, and I would then be available for questions. Thank you very much.